This is the Tech Phantom, and welcome to episode 1 of this walkthrough. And if you saw the trailer, you guys probably have a good idea of what is coming. And let me show you the character creation here. The character creation screen here. I'm showing you my slider positions for this character, a female huntress who I am calling Flecka. And if you saw the video and I'm looking to your feedback on it, please let me know if you can recognize the music that I used for the boss fight with the Northern Undead Silent Demon. I thought it was appropriately themed, but anyway, as it's obvious from the character on screen, this is going to be a viewer-inspired challenge walkthrough with a bow. And I would like to thank Viridian Island, who actually recommended that I do a bow only walkthrough, but then he also wanted me to do a walkthrough that did not use any shield as well. So this is going to be a no shield bow only walkthrough, and to step up the difficulty and the challenge as well, this walkthrough is not going to have any bonfire kindling. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be taking on all of the bosses with 5 Estus flasks, and that's because there are bonfires in the game that will give you 10 Estus flasks right off the bat. Obviously, Firelink Shrine gives you 10 Estus flasks. The Daughter of Chaos bonfire and the Anarlunda bonfire give you 10 Estus flasks as well. And after you've offered up all of the souls to the Lord Vessel, the last bonfire in the game, it will automatically kindle itself and it will give you 20 Estus flasks. But for the most part, in this walkthrough, you're going to see me walking around with a bow, without a shield, and only with 5 Estus flasks equipped. And I am not going to use humanity to heal. And I am, as you can see, I'm going to try to challenge myself as much as I can. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about the reason for trying to challenge myself a little bit with this build or with this walkthrough. But let's get right to it. So the hunter starts with a short bow, which is a decent enough weapon, but we need to have a better bow, and we are going to get the composite bow. So I've gotten some transient curses that will allow me to damage the ghosts in New London ruins. And the reason I have the transient curses, the reason I consumed one, is that I will have to push one ghost out of the way. So I need to have a transient curse consumed in order to do that. I need to have that status effect. So we're going into New London right off the bat, guys, and we are going to get the composite bow. And here you see me run up to this ghost and push it out of the way. So right away, things are pretty much different from the last walkthrough that I did, which was an easy mode walkthrough. And in that walkthrough, the entire goal of premise of that walkthrough was to use a very, very strong intelligence weapon that had tons of firepower, and to use strategies that put your character in as little risk as possible. Well, things are going to change a little bit in this walkthrough. Things are going to be much, much different. And instead of running away from risk and danger, we're actually going to run into it, and we are going to put our character into some very precarious positions. Starting with going into New London, a very, very dangerous area to obtain the composite bow. Now I'm going to talk about the essential equipment and the strategy, or my thinking for this build. So let's start with the composite bow. But I guess before I do that, there is some additional looting that we can do here. And since this is not easy mode, and since the way to this item is for the most part clear, I'm going to pick up this humanity before I homeward bone back to Firelink Shrine. But let's get back to the point that I was trying to make. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why I chose the equipment that I'm going to use. I'm mostly going to talk about why I chose the composite bow and how I'm going to upgrade the composite bow. But I'll also talk a little bit about my rationale, or the reasons why I did not use a shield. And I'm going to do that while you guys see me go through and pick up a bunch of souls. And if you're familiar with my channel and you've seen my other walkthroughs, this is going to be pretty familiar to you guys. Now, there are a couple of situations where I'm going to do things a little bit differently and a little bit more with a little bit more risk. So I will stop talking about equipment and I will reference what's going on screen. So let's get going. So I guess unlike my previous walkthrough, which I called easy mode, after I finished that walkthrough, I really wanted to challenge myself or do something different. And I have never used the bow. Now, when I say I've never used the bow, I'm not just talking about Dark Souls, guys. I'm talking about any RPG that I've ever played. I have never used a character that had bows. And very, very infrequently have I used characters that do ranged attacks. And that's because I like to get in there and mix it up. I like melee. Now, I don't like very, very super tanky characters. I do like characters that are agile. And I do like, I guess you could call them spell swords, but most of the characters that I've played in other RPGs, and actually the very first character that I played, that I made in Dark Souls, was essentially a cleric knight or a faith build. So when I say that I wanted to challenge myself, I wanted to do something completely foreign to me. So I like melee, I like kind of miracles, faith type builds. Well, this build is going to be completely different. I'm going to use a bow. Now, the bow does have ranged attacks similar to what an intelligence build would have, but there is one very, very significant difference. Actually, there are two differences. So let me talk about the two main differences between ranged attacks from an intelligence build as opposed to a bow. Well, the first and most significant difference is that when you have an intelligence build, your firepower is immense, and I proved that in my last walkthrough. You saw that I very, very infrequently had to memorize the boss patterns. I really didn't care what they did. I essentially just had to memorize their first attack or get to a spot where I could start casting spells, and I had so much firepower. My intelligence and my catalysts were so strong that the boss fights didn't last very long. They were literally seconds long. Well, that is not going to be the case with the bow. We are going to get this bow up to as high an attack rating as we can. But no matter what we do, we are never ever going to have the firepower of an intelligence build. So that means that the boss fights are going to be much, 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 much longer, and I am going to have to memorize, and I'm going to have to be very good at evading the bosses. Now, one quick thing on screen here, guys, is that I did pop a humanity prior to taking on this crystal lizard, and the reason I did that is I'm hoping that I get some titanite chunks. Now, I didn't get the chunks that I was hoping for. I got some large shards, which is good enough, I guess. That's going to mean a little bit less farming in order to get the bow up to a +10, but I really, really wanted titanite chunks, and that's because farming titanite chunks with the bow is dangerous and difficult to do. I am going to do a little bit of that in this video, and I'll show you that it's possible. But it's much easier to farm large shards than to farm Titanite chunks, so that's why I was hoping for chunks. Alright, and another thing that I'm going to do in this video that's a little bit different from other walkthroughs, how I start other walkthroughs, is I am going to take an alternate route to the wolf ring. And like I said, if you're familiar with my videos, you know that I like to collect souls at the beginning and get the wolf ring and buy the crest of Artorias. And normally I go through this fog gate and I head to the right and I I chop down the tree that's guarding the path. But this time I have a bow and I only have my fists, so it's gonna take me a long time to get rid of that tree. So I've decided to skip it and do the alternate route. Now you want to make sure that you have a full health bar, but if you come to this spot right here and you do a drop with any base level characters, you will survive that drop and you will avoid the tree, and you'll gain a little bit of time trying to get to the wolf ring. Alright, so let's go back to equipment. So I was talking about the differences between ranged attacks from intelligence builds from spells versus ranged attacks from bows, and the first difference was the firepower. So the second difference is that when you're casting a spell, you can have the shield equipped on your left hand, and very quickly you can hold up your shield after you've cast the spell. And with some spells like Homing Crystal Soul Mass and with Pursuers, they're active on your body for a certain amount of time, and you don't even have to worry about casting them. You can pre-cast them going to the area where you want to take on your enemy, and you can hold up your shield, and you can be very, very safe with that kind of a strategy. Well, that is not really true with the bow. And that's because the bow is a two-handed weapon. In order to shoot the bow, you can equip it on your left hand or your right hand, but in order to shoot it, you're going to be using both hands. So even if you have a shield equipped on your offhand, you have to, the shield will be put away when you shoot. And after you shoot, after you've made the shot, in order to use your shield, you're gonna have to hold it up again. And I actually did a test run where I used the shield, and the shield was kind of getting in the way because there's a little bit of a pause. The mechanics are a little bit different. So I actually thought that it was easier and faster to do this walkthrough without a shield. Now that's going to mean that it's going to put an emphasis on knowing the patterns of the enemies and evading and getting to the making sure that you are at the right spot so you're able to lock on and you're able to fire on the bosses, but from a relatively safe distance that will allow you to evade. So that's going to be critical, but at least in my test run, I actually found, for me personally, that it was easier to concentrate and to think about what's going on screen and the boss fight without having to worry about equipping or holding up my shield, because the bow is a two-handed weapon. So anyway, those are the two reasons, or those are the two biggest difference between ranged attacks with the bow versus ranged attacks from an intelligence, from spells or even miracles. Alright, so the other reason that I decided not to use the shield on this build, on this walkthrough, is that I wanted to challenge myself. The first reason, obviously, I talked about it, it's the actual mechanics. I found the mechanics of the game, the mechanics of combat, to be less distracting if I didn't have to worry about a shield. But I also wanted to up the challenge content, and the reason I wanted to do that is because I've done a large number of runs in Dark Souls, and I thought it was time to do something that was completely unfamiliar to me. So, like I said, since I'd never played a bow wielder in Dark Souls, or as a matter of fact in any RPG, what better way to put myself at a disadvantage and to allow me to experience a sense of accomplishment for doing something that you're not very familiar with and you're finding challenging. What better way to do that than with using a bow? Now, my only concern was going to be that I wasn't going to enjoy the walkthrough because I haven't enjoyed bows in other games. But it turns out that this was one of the most fun, and it also turned out to be one of the most rewarding walkthroughs that I've done. And
Come again.
I have Dark Souls to thank for that. It's just the masterpiece of a game. No matter what kind of build or what kind of strategy I use, I always end up just having a lot of fun no matter what I do. Whether I use a tank, whether I use a spell sword or a magic build or an intelligence build. And in this case, the bow. And I think the reason for that is the mechanics of the bow itself. And at the end of this walkthrough, I'll talk about the things that I liked and the things that I did not like about the using a bow only build in Dark Souls. But I really like the way the bow shoots. I really like the animation. Um, I One of the most important things that the developers decided to do is that the other buttons, when you have an arrow knocked and you're ready to shoot it, if you're holding down the shoulder button on the PS3, for example, um, if you press another button, that will take priority over the shooting button. So that means that even if you're ready and you have an arrow knocked and ready to go, you can evade at the very last second. So that mechanic made things quite a bit more fun, and I think the walkthrough would have been a lot more difficult, and I wouldn't have enjoyed the mechanics as much without that specific mechanic in the game. All right, so let me get back to what's going on screen. And again, this is something a little bit different from what I've done before. I'm going to go get the rusted iron ring right at the beginning of the game. Now, normally in the past, what I've done is I waited until I had a good weapon or enough intelligence in order to defeat Knight Oscar and get the crest shield, and then I would continue on my merry way and get the rusted iron ring. But in this case, I decided to just run for it, and it turns out that it's not very difficult to run at the beginning of the game and get the rusted iron ring. Probably the trickiest part of the whole thing is to evade the four, and let me unstick one of these guys here. These two dummies were stuck in the door frame there. But the trickiest part of getting the rusted iron ring is evading the hollows with the torches at the beginning. There are four of them, and if you try to go through them with a base level character, if they hit you, they'll stun you and they'll kill you. But if you saw what I did, and you can rewind and watch the video, if you saw what I did, I actually jumped over them, and that lessens the risk quite a bit, and that actually gives me a lot of separation, so that I'm able to, for the most part, run freely and get the rusted iron ring. And the reason I wanted to get the rusted iron ring is because it's going to help me in Blighttown, and that's the next location that I'm going to go to. Again, because I'm seeking out souls. I want to have enough souls that I can buy some arrows, and that I can buy the crest of Artorias, and that I can buy the weapon smith box. Alright, so that was a little bit of a water break, so sorry about that, guys. And by the way, if you're wondering why I'm going up the elevator, I'm also wondering the same thing. I forgot that I needed to do more farming at Blighttown. I thought I was done with the farming, so I was heading to Andre. I was taking the elevator, but not yet. We need to go to Blighttown and get some additional souls, some additional items there. Alright, so let's continue talking about essential equipment for this build. So I decided to use the composite bow. Now there are other options in the game as far as bows. Obviously there is a short bow, there is a longbow, and there's also a dark moon bow, and there are great bows. There's a bow that you can get from Guff, and you can also get a great bow from Anor Londo. But I've decided to exclusively use the composite bow. The composite bow is the only item I'm going to have in my as far as a weapon. I'm not going to have a melee weapon. When I need to get enemies out of the way, I'm going to use the fists. And I am going to mix in the pyro glove, and that's because I want to do as much damage as possible. And I'll talk about damage coming up. But I decided to use the composite bow for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has the potential to have the highest attack rating in the game. So no matter what kind of a bow you make, whether it's a chaos bow, whether it's a lightning bow, whether it's a magic bow, whether it's a cult bow, if you compare the composite bow to the other bows, it's going to have the highest attack rating. Now, the composite bow doesn't have the range of other bows. Other bows actually have longer range, like the longbow and the dark moon bow, and the bow the black bow of Ferris have more range. Actually, the bow of Ferris has the best range in the game, but they are not as powerful, or they don't have the potential to be as powerful as the composite bow. So I'm going to be using the composite bow. Now, the other decision that I've made for this build is to make a normal plus 15 composite bow. I am not going to use any kind of elemental or magic bows. And I'm also not going to use the grade bows. And so let me talk about damage first. So the reason why I'm going with a normal plus 15 composite bow is because of the downloadable content. It turns out that Artorias, Calamite, and Manus are very, very resistant to lightning, fire, and magic. And I'm not, like I said earlier, I am not going to kindle Estus flasks. Most of the time I'm going to be running around with 5 Estus flasks. And the boss fights are going to be long, especially as you get later into the game, because the enemies have more vitality, and I'm never going to be able to do the kind of damage with a single shot with the composite bow, no matter what I do to the build. So the boss fights are going to be much longer, and I need fast roll, and the composite bow only weighs 1 unit, so it's going to enable fast roll pretty readily. The great bows are much heavier, and also the arrows for the great bows cost much longer, and the shooting animation takes much longer. So I'm going to use the composite bow. So I don't really mind the fact that the composite bow. And while I say that, let me just tell you that I'm going into the screen here, and I'm going to get this large shard. Now, I've already gotten 2 shards from a crystal lizard, so and I got 1 more shard, large shard, from when I dropped onto Blighttown from the paddle wheel. So now I have 4 large shards. So eventually, this is going to allow me to get my bow up to a +8 without having to do any farming. After I bought some regular Titanite shards, and I've gotten my bow up to a +5. But obviously, of course, we need to get the large ember in order to have Andre take our bow from a +5 to a +6, and we'll be doing that pretty shortly, since, like I told you guys, this is going to be much more different from our previous run. We are going to be putting ourselves in situations that are a little bit more challenging than in the previous run. Alright, but I was talking about damage with the composite bow. So I'm going to use normal damage, and that is because of the downloadable content bosses, which have a ton of magic and elemental defense. And because I want fast roll, I'm going to use the composite bow because it doesn't weigh much at all. Now, the reason, and again, the reason I want fast roll is because the boss fights are going to be long, and Viridian Island wanted to know how to evade. And since I'm not going to be using a shield, I'm going to be evading quite a bit, and the boss fights are going to be long, so I need to be as mobile as possible. Thus, I'm going to use fast roll. So let's talk a little bit more about other essential equipment. At the beginning of the game, probably for the first half of the game, I'm going to be using the wolf ring, and then I'm going to be using the darkwood grain ring. So why do I want to use the wolf ring? I want to use the wolf ring because there is a split second when you're completely sort of immobile while you're shooting your arrow. And if you don't have a lot of poise, you will be stunned and you will be knocked out of that animation and you won't shoot. And worst of all, you're stunned and the enemies could just continue to clobber you. So the wolf ring is going to allow me to have enough poise that I can continue with the shooting animation and I won't be stunned no matter what. And the darkwood grain ring is going to help with evasion. And that's because the darkwood grain ring gives you more invincibility frames when you do a roll than doing a standard roll without the darkwood grain ring. And also, guys, I have to be completely honest. I really love the darkwood grain ring. So it's, for me, it's just a fun thing, and I just like wearing it. I like flipping around with it. So that's one fun thing that I'm going to do for this build. The other fun thing that I'm going to do for this build is that I'm going to use the full Ornstein set. So that means that my endurance is going to have to go all the way up to 39. And unfortunately, I won't be able to get the endurance to 39 until the last video of this walkthrough. So you won't see me rocking Ornstein set until the very end. But that's my favorite armor set in the game. Just from the way I just love the way it looks, and it's very rare that I have an opportunity to wear the entire set and to fast roll, because it's sort of a mid-weight type of a set. So because the only equipment I'm going to have equipped is the composite bow, this is going to allow me to have fast roll with the Ornstein set. So at the beginning of the game, like I was saying, I'm going to be using the wolf ring, and I'm going to be using the darkwood grain ring. And later, I'm going to switch to Hovel's ring, and I'm going to mix in the hawk ring and the Leah ring. And I'll talk about those rings more in the next video. I'll talk a little bit more about mechanics in the next video, where we're also going to have our first boss fight. So I won't talk about that now. Like I mentioned, the last piece of equipment that we are going to make use of are going to be our choice of arrows. So you can have wooden arrows, you can have fire arrows, you can have magic arrows, or they're called moonlight arrows. You can have large arrows, and you can have arrows that extend the range of the bow, arrows that fly further. Those are the feather arrows. So I'm going to use the wooden arrows, which are the cheapest arrows and the ones that do the least amount of damage. But it turns out that the majority of the damage is going to come from the composite bow itself and from the scaling on my build. So I'm going to use, for the most part, wooden arrows, which is why you guys saw that I bought like 900 arrows or so. And for boss fights, I'm going to use, for the most part, I'm going to use large arrows. Every once in a while, you'll see me put on some fire arrows, but for the most part, I'm going to be using large arrows. And the final thing that I wanted to say about the composite bow is that another reason why I chose the composite bow, and I forgot to mention it, is that this is a bow that is a quality weapon. It has C scaling on both strength and dexterity. So dexterity builds can use it, and also strength builds can use it. So it's more versatile than other bows. The longbow and the black bow affairs are more of dex weapons, and the great bows are more strength weapons. But the composite bow is more of a quality weapon. So if you wanted to evolve your build either in the strength category or the dexterity category, you're able to do that because the composite bow has decent scaling for both dexterity and for strength. All right, so you are seeing the very first usage of a bow here in this video finally, and get ready to see this a lot, guys. So, and I'll talk about the mechanics for the bow, but that's going to do it for this introductory video. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm looking forward to your feedback. And in the next video, we'll take on a couple of bosses, or at least one boss, and I'll finish talking about the mechanics of the ball. This is the Tech Phantom signing off.